We celebrating International Mandela Day. So let's get an international perspective, and who better to talk to than our foreign editor, Sophie Mokoena. Sophie, always a pleasure having you in studio.
Good morning, Blake.
Let's talk about how is this is a global movement for good, one might say, right? And you know, looking at Nelson Mandela's legacy and looking at what he did over the past couple of years, 67 years, you know, dedicated to the struggle and for the fight for freedom. Is it hitting a nerve around the world?
Yes, it does. You are aware that the day was declared an international day by the United Nations, and all countries that are member countries of the UN, they do observe the day. For example, in New York today, in the afternoon, around 4 South African time, that is 16 hours, CAT, and it will be around 14 GMT. The United Nations will have a commemoration or an event to observe the Mandela Day, focusing on issue of social justice and leadership. And we expect our minister, who is currently in the US, Minister Mamuluko Kubai Ngubane, to represent South Africa. Of course, the Office of the Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, will be represented. The President of the United Nations Assembly will also be represented. We expect Dr. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka, who is currently Director for Women at the UN, to join, and high-profile guests, activists, artists, people who are involved in different activities and different sectors of life will participate. And in terms of the continent itself, at the headquarters in Addis Ababa, the African Union will also have an activity. And of course, different countries on the continent will be getting reports from Zimbabwe, from Lesotho, from Kenya. And I know that the South African embassies around the world today, all of them, they are doing good. They are not at the embassies. They are out in communities to do just that.
You know, Nelson Mandela was admired the world over when you look at his legacy and what he stood for. But does his influence still hold sway on the continent especially? Yes,
it does. Particularly at a time where the continent is grappling with the issue of leadership. You are aware that even though some countries did go to elections, there are divisions. You look at Malawi, you look at Zimbabwe currently, you look at Lesotho, there are challenges, there are political challenges, and people are beginning to evoke Madiba in terms of the kind of leadership we need in the SADC region. When you go to countries such as the DRC, you still have instability. One thing that Mandela wanted to see was a united, peaceful, and a prosperous continent. You'd recall that during his time, activities, he visited many countries on the continent, campaigning and working with his peers. When he was released from prison, he undertook different tours to different parts of continent, different countries, to say thank you, but also to indicate that South Africa stands ready to work with the continent in terms of the development of the continent and making the continent a peaceful continent.
Look, I don't expect the purpose and the aim of Mandela Day to resonate as much as it does here in South Africa around the world. But when you look at the various countries, I know the United States has bought onto this in a pretty big way. But when you look at other countries, what stands out in terms of supporting this initiative?
Well, when you look at countries in Europe, you'll find that there's still some, reluctance to really go big. But of course, the embassies in those countries in Europe they do embark on different programs to try and promote the day. But I must tell the truth, this year I don't think the foundation did enough to ensure that it really conscientized people in terms of observing this day today. I don't know whether it has got to do with fatigue after elections and there are too many depressing issues in South Africa. People are focused on the different commissions, and it is for that reason the issue of leadership is so critical based on what we getting from these different commissions in South Africa. Clearly, the problem there was leadership. And I think the theme for this year that looks at social justice and leadership was a best theme that the foundation could choose, but also the UN.
Look, Ndleka Mandela was speaking on The Full View last night and talking about this leadership and what's needed at this stage. But what more could have been done? From your point of view, you said not much has been done in terms of driving this message. What could the
South African government as well? The South African government as well. If we say this is International Day, it must be observed. I expect the South African government to really lead from the front in terms of ensuring that the whole country is aware and also the country is doing something.
How so, though?
I mean, the whole month we are supposed to be engaged in different activities to remind South Africans what this month is all about. But I think we didn't do much.
One of the greatest admirers of Nelson Mandela is Barack Obama, the former US president, and he was here last year delivering, I think it was the 16th Nelson Mandela annual lecture. We have a clip of Obama has been really involved in this something called the Obama Leaders Africa. I think it happened last week, but I was going through his Twitter feed yesterday and I picked up a clip that he posted. I think we have it. Johan, can we just play this clip?
Everybody, I hope you're ready for a great week with the Obama Foundation's Leaders Africa program. We wanted you all to be here because every generation has its own opportunity to make its mark on the world. As Nelson Mandela said, young people are capable when aroused of bringing down the towers of oppression and raising the banners of freedom. That kind of change starts small, community by community, and person by person. And it depends on leaders like you. As you all know, we live in complicated times, and it's easy to get cynical, but you haven't. It's easy to give up.
We're living in complicated times, says Barack Obama. What has he done as a statesman, as a former president, to promote Nelson Mandela Day?
Well, he does get involved in different ways, but you'd recall that it's during his presidency where the Nelson Mandela partnership with the Office of the President in the US was really at the peak, and lots of activities there. And whenever he is discussing with these young people around the world, he always used Nelson Mandela as an example. And you are aware that upon realizing that the current administration is not so committed to that partnership between the foundation and the Office of the President, he decided to use the former president's office and the foundation to continue with that program. And it is for that reason we have many young people from the continent who will be going to the US to, on the program, to get empowered in terms of the leadership programs and other issues, but also to share the vision and the understanding of the youth around the world in terms of what kind of society we want to build in different parts of the world. One thing that we have realized is that young people are very despondent, not only in South Africa, around the continent and around the world, because they feel that the current generation doesn't talk to what they want to see happening, and therefore they want to have a say. It is for that reason when you look at elections in particular on the continent, very few young people participate in such elections. This morning on Morning Live, you had the views of the young people. They feel that we are not doing enough to make the continent a better place for them. We are not doing enough to make South Africa a better place for them. And with the fourth industrial revolution upon us, they are very concerned that they won't be able to get jobs. Already there are millions who are unemployed, even though they are qualified. And therefore they don't see the current leadership doing enough on the continent to ensure that we are ready for the fourth industrial revolution, but there's hope that they will get jobs.
I need to wrap this up, but I just want to throw you one more question with regards to the relationship between the United States and South Africa, and we know what that was when Barack Obama was there, and now, how has that morphed? I mean, when we had Barack Obama in office, I mean, he came to South Africa for the memorial service for Nelson Mandela, and some might say that reignited this urge to change things with Cuba, for instance. And we've seen what happens now, that pushback from the Trump administration. What's the current situation?
There was a constant interaction between Nelson Mandela and Bill Clinton. There was a constant interaction between Thabo Mbeki and Bush. There was interaction between President Jacob Zuma then and Barack Obama. But now it looks like the relations are not so good, almost like frosty, between President Cyril Ramaphosa and President Donald Trump.
And a lot of
I don't think that
issue,
it is political. It is a question of, here you have the President of the United States of America, who, when he was campaigning, make it clear that he doesn't really care much about the foreign policy. He is inward looking. It's all about America first. And now Africa being perceived as this dark continent that can't really emerge or contribute to the well-being of the world. I think that's the notion or the psyche of Donald Trump right now. But I can tell you, yesterday, the candidate that was nominated by Donald Trump, Lana Marx, who is supposed to be the ambassador of the U.S. in South Africa, he went to the interview. The Congress was busy trying to finalize the process with her. We don't know whether they will finally recommend her or there might be changes. And people were questioning the wisdom of appointing that particular candidate. Apparently she's known for being in business of handbags. I mean, already people were making jokes. That's not taking us serious. You are aware that during the inauguration, it was more of a low-key business delegation. At the UN last year, even though President Ramaphosa and President Donald Trump did bump into each other, there was no bilateral meeting. At the G20, no bilateral meeting, and we don't know this time around at the Security Council level, because South Africa is now a non-permanent member of the Security Council. The president is expected to take the presidency of the Security Council. He will be compelled to interact with him, because when you look at the agenda of the Security Council, America is looking at North Korea, the issues of Venezuela, and therefore there must be an interaction. Last year we were told that the Secretary of State of the U.S. will visit South Africa as part of the preparations for perhaps the state visit by Donald Trump. Nothing has come up. Neither have we heard of maybe President Ramaphosa embarking on a state visit or working visit to Washington. Therefore, I don't see it. I mean, even recently in Japan, he met all the big countries except United States of America. So I think a lot needs to be done to ensure that those relationships are at a better level.
Geopolitics is so interesting. Thank you very much indeed for breaking it down. Sophie Mokoena is our foreign editor. All right, let's hand it over now to Desiree.